What happened?
Yes, it is my delight to invite you to worship. Is it a beautiful day in Arizona? I have no doubt that it is. Though the wind is wild and cold here in Michigan, it is beautiful here as well because our neighborhood is who we are, not where we are. I am Fred Wooden. I am your interim minister, and Sunday is our time to be together as a neighborhood. And as you may notice, there's a wonderful African print behind me, which I brought back from South Africa, where that song, Sia Hamba, was first taken down years ago. So we are together in more ways than one. We are together through music and heart. We are together through idea and hope. But let music be our summons. With the Teakwood Choir that we heard a little bit ago, and also through our wonderful Barbara Metz, who will gather us through her prelude music this morning. I'm looking at it to make sure I get it just right as she invites us into worship with Salute d'Amour by Edward Elgar. Thank you, Barbara. What a gift that we have such people in our midst. And Barbara will be joining us in just a moment because among the many gifts we have at Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation are our worship associates, people from the congregation who share in leadership, as Barbara is about to do as we light our chalice. Barbara, could you lead us in that?
Since we don't have the words, I think most of you know them well enough. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work justice.
There are those words that you've said week in and week out, part of what it means to be worship at VUU. Singing is something we do, but sadly the pandemic has kept us from singing together, but we can sing in our hearts and hum along as we take up that most wonderful and familiar of hymns. Last week, a video created by the same Teakwood Mini Choir was not able to be seen due to technical difficulties. It's hard to be a hybrid church, isn't it? Because they worked so hard learning the music and recording their performance. We will see their video. Please enjoy Morning Has Broken by our Teakwood Mini Choir, accompanied by our fellow member and leader, Linda Horton.
Welcome and good morning. I am Barbara Metz, and in addition to providing some of this morning's music, I am serving as your worship associate. First, a couple of housekeeping announcements. In case you have little ones and need some extra attention and a place to fuss, there is a room over here on your right where you may go without disrupting anyone around you. Every Sunday, we offer a pastoral care associate, both in person and on Zoom. In person today, it's Carl Anderson. I know he's here. He will be in the front of the sanctuary. On Zoom is Melissa Bush, and you can contact her either through the private chat during the service or or via email, and you can do that all week, I believe is how it is. They are there for you with a listening ear. Please do remember that the chat will be restricted during the prayer and meditation time as well as during the sermon. But feel free, other than that, to put your joys, your concerns, and your comments and hellos. Also, for you on Zoom, we will have our usual breakout rooms. And I think you know how those work by now. But for newcomers, we suggest that you decline a breakout room and stay right where you are, and this is still for Zoom people, and meet with our wonderful interim minister, the Reverend Fred Wooden. Just don't accept the invitation to a breakout room, and he will be right there for you. For newcomers in the sanctuary, we'll have a welcome circle in that back corner of the room where a few members of this congregation will greet you and answer any questions you might have about either VUU or Unitarian Universalism in general. If you are a newcomer or an almost newcomer, I ask that if you are willing and able, please stand so we can see who you are. Do we have any newcomers? Wow. Welcome, and thank you for standing. It helps us know who you are so we can greet you a little more fully after the service in a safe manner. To all of you, both physically and virtually present, know that you are welcome here regardless of how you got here, how you feel on the inside, how you look on the outside, who you love, who you worship, or how you worship. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we embrace your presence in this interdependent web of a community. Usually, when I am serving as a worship associate, I look at the sermon topic, try to figure out what Reverend Fred will be musing on, and then reflect on that. But this week, I didn't. Instead, I am here representing the Stewardship Committee, of which I am part, and as such, I am taking this offer to offer you, from my heart, an unabashed commercial message. First, let me introduce my fellow committee members. And I think I have a list so I don't forget anybody. Let's see, is Jody here? I don't think. So Jody Freeman, Jim Horton, myself, Ann Schneider, Debbie Simpkins, and Linda Horton, who is our chair. For those of you here on that committee, will you stand so we can recognize you? I would like to add a very, very special thanks to Tricia Amata and Mark Foote for putting together all of our graphic and electronic materials to ensure that this pledge drive goes as well as possible. So, love is our doctrine, service is our prayer, justice is our calling, and money keeps our doors and programs open. This is the time of year that VUU asks you to dig into your pockets as deeply as you can and make a pledge of how you will financially support Our Heart's Home. The Stewardship Campaign is perhaps the single most important annual event that we have, because without your gracious, generous pledge, nothing can happen here. VUU doesn't exist without yours, without mine, and everyone's financial support. Throughout the year, many, if not all of you, give unbelievably of your time and talents. And for that, we are also very grateful. But without, I actually have a pocket today, which is not always happens. Without this green stuff, we cannot keep our doors open, we cannot hire a new minister, watch our children grow in our RE programs, do the social justice work that we do, have a music program, circle suppers, support iHelp. The list goes on and on and on. We need everyone's support. And as a community, hope you will fill out this pledge card that you should have received in your mailbox this week. Then drop it back in the mail, drop it in the collection plate, or go to the website and right at the top of our website page, there's a button that says Give. It drops down, the drop-down box at the very top of it is Pledge 2022. However it works for you to make your pledge, please do so. Make it today, make it this week. As of this morning, we have $90,000 in early pledges. That's from 14 families. It's a fantastic start. Yeah, it is a fantastic start. But we need all of us if we're going to keep our programs running. It could not be more important to you, to me, and to all of us. I have sold my Tempe house. Mark and I will close on a house in Prescott this week. Movers come the following week. And by Friday, we will be up in Prescott to begin a new adventure, making our home in a cooler, quieter, less hurried environment. This has been in the works for some time, but it really came to fruition this summer. We plan to get involved in the Prescott UU community, but because of what VUU has meant to me over the years, I still care to support this community. My heart's home, this home that has shown me love and support. This home that has held me as I made it my way through way too many losses, one after another, before I could catch my breath from the last one. You who welcomed my very special sister. It's really emotional for me. Into this community, and helped make her feel so loved and worthy during her final months. This spiritual home where I could explore my own path, but not without guidance or support. It is with great sadness that I can't take this community with me. It is so special. As my goodbye gift, here is my pledge card, filled out as I hope and encourage you to do. It takes a whole village, and we all know the saying, it's better to give than to receive. But in this case, you get to do both at the same time. And now, for Reverend Fred, it is your turn to ask for more money.
No, I am not asking for more money. Yes. Let's applaud Barbara. It will be a sincere loss to this community not to have Barbara and Mark close by. However, I'm 1,800 miles away, and there are people on Zoom who are perhaps a little closer, but not much. You will always be part of the VUU community, and we will always feel your presence. So we're really grateful for your continuing presence, whether it be personal or financial. I'm supposed to talk about the offering, and I'm going to do that. But I want to dovetail a little bit on what Barbara said. I am a very temporary presence with you. Wendy and I are passing through as interims must, but we also pledge. And we think it's our duty to do that. It's not just to set a good example, but we have to contribute to the good that we are trying to be a part of. And we contribute 3% of my salary because we can. And I want you to think in those terms. Do what you can. In some ways, it is your duty. Do and duty are very similar words after all. However much it is your decision. We don't tell you what to give, but we do expect you to give. because that's your duty as a member of a democratic religious community. But whatever it is you do, know you're in good company, that the people around you are holding up their part of the sky, as it were, and that we're about good work, work that, as Barbara pointed out, reaches well beyond Sunday, well beyond 6400 West Del Rio. It affects people everywhere. So make that pledge commitment. Now, today, I need to talk about the usual gift, and I want those ushers to start working the neighborhood now. Get out there with your plates, put in your pledge card, but more important, also put some money in today, because that's good practice. I spoke about the spiritual practices of liberal religion, and sacrifice is one of them. And sacrifice doesn't mean doing something that hurts. It means doing something that heals. So whatever you put in that plate is part of healing the world, something that goes on in this so-called season of giving. But it's not just the season of giving, it's always the season of giving, because the world depends on gifts that it receives every day, the gift of life, the gifts of home and health and family and friends. These are gifts, not rights. So click, text, email, call, however you can. Make the practice of giving part of your spiritual life, and make your sacrifice something that helps to heal the world as well as your soul. Wow. Thank you, Barbara, for all you did. Now, ordinarily, my wonderful colleague, Katie Seifert, would stand up and lead you in a centering time. This is her Sunday away, so I'm going to pick up that task. What is this centering thing we do? Well, there's a wonderful word that Anne Morrow Lindbergh uses in her book, Gift from the Sea. It's a German word, Zerrissenheit, which means torn to piecesness. Have you ever felt at some point that your life was being torn into little pieces, this task, this obligation, this list? We feel like we're coming apart in this modern world. This moment asks you to take the time to pull the pieces back together. Centering means to let the gravity of your soul pull the pieces back into a wholeness. We often start by noticing our breath, something we have to do all the time. It is said that when you take a deep breath and let it out, that it stimulates a nerve that induces calmness. Maybe so. I do know that when we take time to notice our breath, we also notice we are alive, and that it is a frail life indeed, but it is ours. And as we drink in the air, knowing that it was shared by millions, if not billions, of other beings before we breathed it in, and as we exhale, we know that we are giving it back to be shared by plants and animals around the world, that the same molecules that come in circulated the globe again and again and have been in lungs from time immemorial. And that no matter where we end up in life, that the air we exhale will give life to others as well. You could say that centering is the time when we do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation with ourselves. And so take that breath again and realize that the air that is moved when music is made is the air you are breathing. We know in this pandemic time, we don't want to share it too readily, but we know we need to share the vibrations, the motion, the wind of life. And now Barbara will continue giving gifts to VUU by sharing an old dance called a saraband. It's very slow, stately, worth breathing through. And that will be our time of meditation. We breathe in, we breathe out. We know music, just in the breathing. Here's a time where I put a few words that try to capture the character, not of the music, but of the moment. One of my favorite poets, Denis Levertov, has written, "Marvelous truth, confront us at every turn, in every guise, iron ball, egg, dark horse, shadow, cloud of breath on the air. Dwell in our crowded hearts, our steaming bathrooms, kitchens full of things to be done, the ordinary streets. Thrust close your smile, that we may know you, terrible joy." That's the answer to Anne Morrow Lindbergh's Zerrissenheit, a prayer that the marvelous truth confront us with a smile that brings forth a terrible joy. What does that terrible joy mean? It means a kind of overpowering hope that takes away the reluctance to be present to everything. Don't we all make those choices? I'm going to look at that, but not that. Listen to you, but not you. Think about this, but not. And we have to. But Denis Levertov is saying our real prayer is, may I hear it all, see it all, sense it all, and not flee. That is what I think the Buddha wants us to be able to do, what all prophets have experienced, to have a moment or two in a life when it's all there. It won't happen to you today, certainly not now. But in being present now, you may be ready then, when the marvelous truth comes through the steaming bathrooms and the busy kitchens and the crowded streets and thrusts close its face. That's why Rabbi Heschel, great Jewish voice, and this is Hanukkah, so his voice is especially present to me right now, speaks of prayer in this way. Prayer invites God to be present in our spirits and our lives. Marvelous truth. Prayer cannot bring water to a parched land, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, rebuild a weakened will. When we invite the truth in, the marvelous truth, with its smile, we find a moment when we feel nourished and our thirst for meaning is met. A moment when our sorrows that rend us from head to toe heal just a bit, and we feel a little more whole. We find a moment when we can step forward and not backward, remain present and not flee. Isn't that what we want when we pray, whatever the words or silence is about? And so let that be our hope, that here you learn to pray, that you may be present when the truth presents its wonderful smile to you. We breathe in, we breathe out. And now we sing. If you're in the sanctuary, you will hum. If you're at home, join in as you wish. As we listen and join the video choir singing over my head. Katie and Izzy put this together. And again, like last week, we tried to get it to you, but the video didn't quite make it. So we thought it was worth seeing and hearing again. Good hymns are always worth repeating, aren't they? So, tech folk, help us sing, shall you?
Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a joy somewhere.
Over my head, I hear music in the air.
Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air.
There must be a joy somewhere.
Over my head, I hear singing everywhere. Over my head, I hear singing everywhere. Over my head, I hear singing everywhere. There must be a joy somewhere. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear singing everywhere. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a joy. There must be a joy. There must be a joy somewhere.
Two quick responses to the hymn. Why do I even bother preaching with music like that? God bless America. And I have a much more grim message than that, so I'm glad you had it now. But I do have a sermon for you. And while it sounds grim, that only means that it means, well, all that it means is that there's work to be done. There's always work to be done. So let me get out my text here, which I worked on so laboriously. Here it is, right here. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. So begins that most famous of Christmas stories on this first Sunday in Advent. It's the second Sunday in Advent, now that I think about it. And it's perhaps the oldest story after the biblical story, of course. There have been multiple versions filmed and staged, even animated. It is so pervasive that it spawned its own book, The Man Who Invented Christmas, which was about the writing of the first book and was itself turned into a movie. Though I have not read that book, I've read the original many times. For years, I even read it aloud each week in Advent to a small but faithful group after worship. When it was written, you see, reading aloud was very common. In fact, it was what most people did to entertain themselves in the evening. Dickens read it himself aloud when he went on lecture tours. It was shortened, of course, to a single sitting. I can tell you, if you read it all out loud, you're going to be there for several hours. You may know that I walk a lot, 5 or 6 miles a day if I can. This is not only good physical exercise, but it's good mental exercise as well. It's when sermons take shape and thoughts run through my head. Charles Dickens composed many of his books that way, walking through the countrysides of England. And Charles Darwin, by the way. The Origin of Species did not take shape while he was collecting specimens on the Galapagos Islands. No. It happened at Down House in England. He would go out taking long walks, trying to assemble his thoughts into a coherent order. So the theory of evolution didn't come when he was in Galapagos. It came when he was in England. And I've been there and I've walked that path. Walking is good for thinking. In my case, though, it's also good for memorizing, to forestall dementia, he hopes, and make my time afoot worthwhile. I began memorizing things years ago, short things, medium-sized things, and then a very long thing, Dickens' Christmas Carol. Now, I have not memorized the whole book, but in the years I have worked on it, I can recite the first 2 chapters pretty faithfully. Memorizing is kind of mental walking when you look at it. It consists of a lot of deliberate repetition. As I tread along, I rehearse a sentence or two. I add on only when I've got the first 2, 3 sentences lined in place, and I build it up over time. Of course, those words I started with this morning are the first ones I memorized. Marley was dead, to begin with. What a way to start a Christmas story. Scrooge gets mentioned right away, but we have no idea who he is. At least no one did the first time it was mentioned. And it is clear that there is a narrator, because the next paragraph goes on to say, mine. I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about the doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. So he uses the word I. But we never learn who that person is. It's an invisible, anonymous narrator. Did you ever notice that? The book has many curiosities in it that familiarity and editorial license have glossed over. Being a book meant for his time, there are references that now make no sense to you and me, very like the Bible in lots of ways. For example, as the nephew and clerk exchange greetings, Scrooge mutters to himself, "There's another fellow, my clerk, with 15 shillings a week, a wife and a family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam." There are 2 references there that are probably obscure to most people. One is 15 shillings. Well, translated into modern and contemporary pay, that would be $90 a week. So imagine trying to sustain a family on $90 a week. And then you wonder less about why he thinks the clerk, as yet unnamed, should be talking about a Merry Christmas. What does he have to be merry about? The second is the word Bedlam. I'll retire to Bedlam, he says. Well, that's a contraction of the word Bethlehem and refers to the insane asylum, as it was called, Bethlehem Asylum, in the city of London, which was where you took mentally ill people in Scrooge's day. So when he says, "I'll retire to Bedlam," he means that society as a whole has gone insane about Christmas. It's all nonsense, which is what humbug means. But my point is not to give you an annotated version of the familiar story. It is to say that whether he knew it or not, Dickens was writing theology in this story, and a very unorthodox theology at that. And what's more, since he was attending the Unitarian Church in London at the time, you might say he was writing Unitarian theology. Do you know the real title of the book? A Christmas Carol in Prose, being a ghost story of Christmas. That may be the most artful title ever crafted. The chapters are not called chapters, but stades, as in lines of music. And then there's this Ghost of Christmas part. What could be more contrary than pairing ghosts with Christmas? And where's the carol part? And why isn't there music? It's an obscure, entrancing, and difficult title to boot. Stave 1, what we would call chapter 1, is the most ghostly, replete with every trope of ghost stories then and since. It's creepy. Dickens says of Scrooge, he lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. There were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of a building up a yard where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying that it had run there as a young house, playing at hide and seek with the other houses, and had forgotten the way out again. You'll notice he's using humor now to get his creepy point across. Having established Scrooge as the most material of men, when he sees Marley's face in the door knocker, he brushes it off with a pooh-pooh and closes the door with a bang. When he hears the clanking chains approach his door, something he remembers having learned was associated with ghosts, he says to himself, "It's humbug still. I won't believe it." And it comes through the door. The flames leap up as though it recognized him. There he is, Marley's ghost, draped in chains. And even then he refuses to believe. Only when Marley drops the bandage from around his head and chin, often put around cadavers to keep their mouths from opening. Only then does he succumb in fear and drop upon his knees and fold his hands before his face to hide his eyes. Then follows a conversation by turns harrowing and hilarious, a real tour de force of Dickens' skills. Once admitting he does believe in spooks, to quote the lion from another book, Scrooge ventures to ask, "Why do spirits walk the earth and why do they come to me?" And here is where Dickens begins to preach. "It is required of every man," says the ghost, "that the spirit within him should walk abroad amongst his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander the world. Oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share and might have shared and turn to happiness." Again, the spectre raised a cry and shook its chains and wrung its shadowy hands. "You're fettered," said Scrooge. "Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you?" Scrooge trembled more and more. "Or would you know," pursued the ghost, "the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full as heavy and long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain." Our common colleague, James Ishmael Ford, noticed something about a Christmas carol that he posted on Facebook a few days ago, that Dickens is preaching karma here. Well, yes, of course. If you're not familiar with it, in all of the ancient Indian religions, Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist, there is this notion that every act we commit in life has an impact on our eternal outcomes. And the more good we do, the closer we get to being released from the bondage of reincarnation. And the more bad we do, the more lives we have to live in the slavery, in the bondage of life itself. That's very much what Marley's ghost is sort of suggesting, that the actions we commit in life or fail to commit become weights that hold us back. They become chains. Marley's ghost goes on later and says, not to know that any Christian spirit working within its little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life's opportunities misused, but such was I. Oh, such was I. So Marley's ghost is sharing with Scrooge the realization that he had created the burdens of this chain, this ghostly chain that was holding him back, entombing him in the consequences of his own actions. Jacob Marley, ghost that he is haunted by his own past, chained by his own choices, condemned not by some vengeful God, but by his own choices, his own acts. His groans and cries and shakes are all the result of his own choices made in life. This is all, of course, to make an example to Scrooge, but knowing his former partner, he has arranged for further instruction, as you well know. You will be haunted by 3 spirits, says the ghost. This is not welcome news to Scrooge, who, when told this, says, I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, says the ghost, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1. Couldn't I take 'em all at once and have it over, Jacob? Hinted Scrooge. I love that joke. As Marley says soon after, my time is nearly gone. And I mean that for me. I've taken you partway down a road we will continue in 2 weeks. There is only time left this morning to suggest that we are all haunted by our choices, and should be. We all know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it will be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. We all know that we could have done more and should have done more. That is a self-evident truth to all who have a morsel of moral insight. The ghosts that Dickens will conjure will reveal to Scrooge not something new at all, but his own life and his consequences. The real haunting is not the spirits who come and visit him, but Scrooge haunts himself, dramatically presented with his past and the next day, in the present with the one after that, and his future with the one after that. Karma is quite real in this story. Dickens lays it out as vividly as Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, but in very thoroughly British form. Your deeds will find you out, your omissions and your commissions. I like to think that we should ponder this, because we as Unitarian Universalists see a problem with a wrathful God who is keeping score. But what if we are really keeping our own score, and that our ultimate value is being carried through into the universe, maybe not in some magical way, but in some actual way? The consequences of our acts are real. The things we failed to do, the things we chose to do when we could have made better choices should haunt us. I'll say more in 2 weeks when I'm back again. But for now, the gift under the tree this week is that we are all haunted by ourselves, if we're honest. Behind the glitter and sparkle of the season is the darkness of winter, and its reminder that all of us face an ultimate darkness eventually. The promise and hope of the season, the part we crave and love, well, it's like the stars. which are visible only at night, which means only when we face our own haunting can we find those stars by which we should be guiding our journey through life. So dare to be haunted by your own life, to let that chain we have all made become visible to you. Let the darkness be present, because in that darkness, you will find the stars that can guide you through the rest of your life. With that somber message in heart, I bid you farewell from the sermon, but now invite you to look east. One of the greatest hymns in our hymn book is People Look East. I love this hymn because it invites us to see the world through three different images. Love the guest, love the rose, and love the star. I'm not sure if that's the right order, but our VUU video ensemble will share it and hum along in the sanctuary or sing along if you're at home. Shall we sing together, People Look East?
People look east, the time is near of the crowning of the year. Make your house fair as you are able. Trim the hearth and set the table. People look east and sing today. Love, the guest is on the way. Girls, be glad the earth is bare. One more seed is planted there. Give up your strength, the seed to nourish, that in course the flower may flourish. People look east and sing today. Love, the rose is on the way. Stars keep the watch when night is dim. One more light the bowl shall brim, shining beyond the frosty weather, bright as sun and moon together. People look east and sing today. Love, the star is on the way.
Some words from Wendell Berry, which I think are good at this time. The love and the work of friends and lovers belong to the task and are its health. Rest and rejoicing belong to the task and are its grace. Let tomorrow come tomorrow. Not by your will is the house carried through the night. And then let us rise to the next day, ready to add our labors in a way that brings grace and joy and hope to the world. And now I invite Barbara Metz to extinguish our chalice, and then I'll give you further instructions.
Extinguish the chalice. I failed to make it very clear, bring it to your attention that this brochure that you will get or have gotten in the mail was designed by Trish Armata, and we want to really thank her for her artwork. So,
Go ahead and blow out.
it's a persistent flame. Join me. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week, path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again.
Now everyone, pay attention as Barbara gets ready to provide us some traveling music as we leave. I need you to remember, if you're on Zoom, you have a breakout room that you can join. And if you're part of the community, please join a breakout room. If you're in the sanctuary, please greet one another safely from an appropriate distance. Look at those wristbands and make sure you are observing that. If you are brand new and want to talk with me and a couple of other veterans, do hang around in the main room instead. And I'd like now to let you know that Barbara, perhaps playing for the last time for a long time, will be giving us the Allemande from Bach's Third Cello Suite as we move into our breakout rooms and friendship circles. Barbara, please.